Cool. I think we are
Your
live.
competitors will whip.
What's up, guys? Uh, Thanks for coming to this. This should be cool. We are going to do a shape design on how to make characters in a way that kind of changed everything for me. I've become a big believer in using shapes first for design, so I want to walk through a cool workflow with that. We're going to do two characters because there's this very specific. It's kind of a trick, kind of a design principle that we can use once and then totally do it an opposite way, and it's just as effective. So I think this is going to be something useful to put in your toolkit. I also want to do a of Concept Art Academy. My mentorship program is now open for enrollment. We have our next session starting in February. We keep class sizes pretty small and it's getting full-ish, but there are some spots available. So if you have been considering that, it's a great chance to ask questions, and I'll show you guys that quickly. But mostly want to focus on the fun stuff. So I will just jump right in and share my screen. Cool. All right. Nice. Just making sure that is all working. Looks good.
Yeah, looks good.
Sweet. All right. So I have started with two like pretty carefully drawn figures. I think when designing characters, like the person at the center of it, basically this mannequin that we draw first, is sort of where the whole project is going to be won or lost. So everything from proportions to just pose and attitude. Like, hopefully, you kind of are sensing that human factor with both of these already. So, actually, in a lot of ways, I think this is the hard part of character design, but it's also a whole massive topic, and maybe figure drawing is something for another day. But I really recommend this, like starting with a figure drawing that you are just very, very happy with and that feels like that human character you're trying to create from the get-go is kind of a way to guarantee that you won't end up with something at the end that feels sort of weird. That even if you design all of this really perfect, awesome costuming, if some proportion is just wildly weird, or if the pose is stiff or unnatural, it's just not going to work. So anyway, that's what I have done ahead of time. And two figures, similar but like kind of different personalities, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. I'd say kind of like, I don't know, confidence, badassery, and more of a like quiet confidence, more like martial arts type of vibe here. Let me close mail so that doesn't happen. And the designs are going to reflect that. So today we will be designing with shapes. I'll basically just be doing this. Now, you can absolutely like design with lines and sketch over a mannequin type setup like this. Like you can still get a lot of that benefit of having it already be a sound character. But what I love about this is it instantly lets us see silhouette. Like what are these shapes going to do to kind of, I don't know, give us that vibe, give us that overall action line. So if I like turn her into this triangular kind of wizard with a big cloak or something, what does that do for the silhouette? Now, here's the first little trick I want to talk about today. This has changed everything for me. Navigator in Photoshop has been this sort of useless appendage that has just sort of been there for me forever. I mean, it's sort of the little mini map of Photoshop. Like what use is that? I can kind of see everything most of the time. I don't really need this. what has turned this into one of my favorite Photoshop tools is it lets me see things at thumbnail size all the time. The truth is always here. Sometimes when you are lost in the pixels or working on details, you can lose sight of that bigger picture. The thumbnail somehow gives you that perfect, like, squint at it. Or I don't know, I used to, hold your image far away, hold your Procreate tablet away. It's all the same thing, but this is a great job. This does a great job of just letting you keep one eye off to the side and just make sure you're not going down any wrong turn. So Navigator is sort of like instant thumbnail view. What I love about silhouette or shape design like this is it lets you see stuff instantly. It lets you not be surprised. Like anytime I do a line art design and I end up blocking the line art to like fill, I'm always surprised by something. It's like the silhouette somehow didn't behave the way I thought it would. Something is like too big and visually dense somewhere, or there's some weird little, I don't know, kind of visual noise happening somewhere. There's always some surprise. Designing directly with shapes makes that not happen. It's like you're just seeing the thing immediately. And I've been told all kinds of cool science about why that is. Like our eyes are sort of just tuned in to notice shapes immediately. It's why like that pile of clothes on the chair in your bedroom scares the hell out of you when it's dark. It's like that shape is just very visibly it immediately clicks with our lizard brains. So let's use that. Um, okay, for a base layer, I'm just kind of filling in a lot of her figure. Actually, it's a good, this is why I was spending so much time on pose and how the general silhouette of the character reads, because a lot of that's going to shine through. She's going to kind of have, for design number one, sort of form fitting, like, I don't know, skinny jeans or leggings or something on her bottom half. And I'm going to do sort of a t-shirt type. Um, we're actually not going to do this because of what for the top half. Good enough for now. A first layer. Create a second. And let's try a something like close to the skin tone, even lighter. All right. Here, some use of my current mentorship students or alums are around. I'm sure you all are reading my mind right now and know what after. I am basically looking for contrast. I want her top half to be this big, chunky, shape dense thing because her bottom half is so form fitting and light. This is kind of how we're going to make contrast happen. So I'm thinking like a big puffer jacket, or I mean, honestly, I don't have much of a genre in mind for this. We could probably make her cyberpunk pretty quickly, but I'm kind of just trying to make some cool clothes. This is sort of just fashion design and character design sort of overlap a lot, and I'd say this is that. Having that contrast, kind of form-fitting, sparse, light thing, um, kind of popping against a very visually dense, chunky thing. And actually, if there are any questions so far, I'm kind of just going to be tinkering with this shape so I could stop monologuing for a second. Anything, any questions, guys?
Nothing's coming through yet, although I was curious, are you sort of using two tones there to kind of help with the contrast, like that sort of lighter gray versus the darker pants, or
Totally. It actually helps me just organize this in my brain a little bit. It's sort of like element one, element two, and we can always tinker with that. Like I could certainly change that to be, something else really easily, but I kind of like this and I am sort of enjoying the contrast right now. Cool. Well, I think that is working. Along those approximate lines, if we're keeping with the whole idea of like chunky and visually dense on the upper half, I'll give her a scarf. And that is definitely not the right value. There we go. Let's keep going. Bigger, chunkier, more chunky.
there's some comments just coming in about Gucci and style. It's more
It's
comedic point, just like your fashion sense.
that's it. It's her face too. She's got a runway model
Yeah.
energy. Um, absolutely. So I don't know. Maybe let's fold this scarf up a little bit. It's like shapes just make this such a sculpting process. It's like, I don't know, adding and subtracting masses really feels organic, like we're shaping something, and I can just see it and make judgments and decisions on it really instantaneously, which I love. Um, I don't know, kind of cool, but maybe we'll just leave that like folded. Maybe we'll do like dramatic. Oh, here we go. We'll turn the fans on in the photo shoot. Too much.
It
Um,
it seems like it's sort of ad lib at this point. Someone's asking, are you working from like a rough brief or are you just kind of making it up as you go?
that's such a great professional question. I had an idea of what I wanted to do, but let's say, you know, I'm sort of reverse engineering this because I'll just make the brief sound like what I wanted to paint. But sure, I would do this exact same thing for a professional assignment where I had a very specific brief. Actually, the video I put out recently with that hunter character for Wild Imaginary West was this exact process, sort of shapes first and then refinement. So, right, we want to start with the human being. So let's say this is kind of like high fashion, really cool runway model woman. Let's start with the pose on that. And I think this like kind of raised chin, super relaxed, like all weight on one leg feels like that. Then it just becomes a question of what shapes, what visual design language can I use to like really sell that to make this feel like what my brief would be. So you're exactly right. This I probably should have started with that, but this is sort of just like a process and a workflow. Cool.
And are you using like reference pictures or photos for inspiration while you're working on these things or
If I were doing this profession, like if this were something I was hired to do right now, absolutely. For the sake of a YouTube demo, I am going to just stick with some shape languages that are in my visual library, things I have just done times before. Just have to go hunt references. That so awesome questions, and a lot of these steps I'm taking are sort of abbreviated because I want the video to not be an hour and a half of you guys watching me like troll Pinterest and saying, "Ooh, that's cool." So I sort of showed up with a plan. I'm totally cheating. Okay, pretty cool. Kind of feeling the general shapes are working, and I think this whole idea of contrast is effective. So I kind of like doing this sort of thing. Um, it's sort of like this visual measuring stick of how much of what shape or value is happening where. Um, and I think that's a good way to sort of keep an eye on just the simplest possible dosages of each element and make sure it's happening in a pleasing way that kind of fits the shape dynamics that we're trying to stick to. Okay, sparse on the bottom, big and chunky on the. Here's where we start reciprocating things, like flipping it upside down a little bit, um, either with color or with shapes or with some other visual element. Here's where I like to kind of go to the opposite end of the character and grab something from the opposite side and kind of echo it down below. So, I mean, certainly the color, like this light value, is helping to connect those visual dots. But we could go about that in a different way. Let's try that as option one. What if instead of just the color, we were going with the idea of just visual mass? What if I just gave her like big boots? I think I like that better, actually. Um, I mean, definitely if we are purely just investigating shape statements, like what kind of fashion vibe this puts out, this is a totally different thing, but I find that kind of cool. So, grabbing a bit of what's happening on the top half and putting it on an island on the bottom half, sort of echoing something from across this gulf of the other thing. So if we jump back to this, actually, just for the sake of organization, maybe I will raise the value of the boots just a bit. Cool.
Someone's asking this, I think this is a cool question. How do you avoid your characters looking the same with this technique?
Well, I'm hopefully going to make this one look quite different. Um, Design language is the short answer. Like what genre, what period, where does this character live? What world are we building with these shape choices? And that comes from like having a really deliberate shape system that you are working within. So for example, I'm gonna do maybe a little more like, I don't know, Star Warsy or like mystical space warrior type of thing. Just I'm basically saying Jedi, I realize with that. And it's going to be different shapes. So hopefully that answers that. But in another sense, I think a lot of my characters probably do end up looking the same. But Let's call that visual branding.
And
Uh,
maybe that's sort of like links into another question where someone's wondering, like, do you recommend a brush shape that, or like ones that benefit this kind of thing? Maybe there's something that's connected there.
I love that question. I totally should have mentioned that. Let's look at this brush. And this is pretty much the only brush I use for this. Um, if you use a circle, everything tends to look sort of bubbly and like rounded corners. It sort of removes the possibility of you having a sharp edge anywhere. With a very flat, kind of rectangular brush, I love this for a few reasons. It lets you make like a wide mark with an upstroke and then a much thinner mark with a side stroke, kind of like I don't know, a chisel tipped pencil or a marker or something. Just that dynamic kind of makes all kinds of cool shapes happen. It also lets you, with one brush, decide if you want to make something curvy and angular. So like her elbow, for example, I really love the shape contrast of this long, gentle curve and then this absolutely chopped angle. So, great question, and I'm so glad you asked that because I don't think this works as well with brush. It kind of makes bubbly vibe with everything, which actually sometimes there is a case for that. There's a time when you want that, but not really for this. Great question. I am pretty pleased with this as general shape design. I think the proportions of each thing work. We have kind of nice, big, empty areas of one element, visual activity. Um, my mentorship students definitely have heard me say that many times. So let's jump interiorly and start defining some of these shapes within. I actually am going to switch to line art just a bit here, just because I don't think my job is really done, especially in this big empty jacket without this. So, well, you know what? In the spirit of shape only, I'm going to backtrack on that. Let's not use line art.
Someone's wondering uh, if you're if you have materials in mind at this point, or are you just purely working with shapes at the moment?
A little bit, kind of purely shapes, but anytime we're making a choice on like form-fitting pants or a big puffy jacket, I definitely have like an idea in mind that this is some kind of a jacket that has volume of some kind. So it's like filled with feathers or something like that. It's a very thick material. There are questions that I'm sort of starting to try to answer mentally already, but mostly shapes for sure. Okay, I'm actually glad for the pivot here because I think this is going to be cooler. Um, the benefit of having this on a layer is I can just lock the trim job. It's important that it's this one, not the other locks, because that makes it so that you only are painting within the pixels of that layer. And I'm just a highlight shape. And it's like we're doing a little bit of rendering, but I think much more importantly is we're describing where things will be and where they will be kind of empty. I think the pants are a nice big rest zone for this, but let's let's kind of keep going. Let's have this jacket have some kind of pattern or area where visual activity gets more or less. Um, Repeating lines, some kind of pattern. Uh, I love doing like a jacket that has a shoulder that has some kind of extra layer of something. I mean, often for no real purpose other than it looks cool. And that's sort of what we're doing here. But also just for the sake of visual balance, like having it be empty in some parts and more visually active in others. And this is kind of linear, like this is line art a little bit, but it's also mostly shapes and it's all happening on one layer. It's just this really organic way to just stay in the flow and make your make your shapes as strong as they can possibly be. And I can do more of that like on the scarf, for example. If we just go a tiny bit darker, I can, do we want this scarf to be all like loud and um, with overlaps? It might even have some kind of dense pattern on it. Um, Actually, I really like how the scarf is sort of one of the noisy, visually active areas with that little bit of accent. And I think it's still far from being too busy because these pants are just such a nice long stretch of visual calm and emptiness. Isn't that cool? Honestly, this one is pretty close. I could add some little embellishments like clasps where the jacket might button at the top and bottom. This is where I would probably need to actually start very deliberately researching this so that I know what each thing is. That is ultimately the job of a concept artist is to sort of know the answers to these questions, like to not just be like, whatever, a shape that looks cool. That's how we start. By the end of it, you need to, if the 3D modeler comes back to you saying, what is this supposed to be? I don't know is not a great answer. Oh, and she needs hair.
I was
Cool.
wondering, is it
Yeah.
possible to design with shapes using colors rather than gray tones?
Yeah, it is. That's just sort of another level of stuff you have to be thinking about at the same time. So actually, once you have these shapes in place, it's remarkably easy to come back and, you know, apply blending modes, apply adjustment layers, whatever you need to do to kind of colorize these things. And it's done as a design, then you're just sort of switching modes. I like phasing things, like tackling one challenge at a time stuff, just because it's easier to like compartmentalize, but absolutely feel free to just pick a different color at each phase and it just keeps keeps the ball rolling forward. Everything is so like for example, we could just colorize this and kind of start going with that.
You
Let's
mentioned rest areas with the legs. Someone's
Yes.
wondering how much should they have, or rather, how do I know how much rest area to give to like a relative detailed area?
That's such a great question. Um, Tough because I think it's going to be kind of a case by case type of thing. Like sometimes you're going to want a character to be more visually active on balance than other. Um, I usually let the genre drive that a little bit. Like, for example, there are certain genres that are just designed to be over the top and crazy. Like, I think Wasteland, Mad Max type of stuff is just by nature just crazy. There's a lot going on. So I think you have a higher budget of visual activity. We can have just bolts and barbed wire and patterns and rust and shapes everywhere, and it will look appropriately crazy. Um, some more minimalist design languages, we're going to want to like tip that balance more to the side of emptiness, like the movie Oblivion with Tom Cruise. All of the tech in that movie was just these very simple kind of empty shapes, but there was those little areas of visual activity to kind of set it off. What I would recommend is, as a design rule in general, is whenever you have two elements, I'm really fond of my big gray bars today. Whenever you have two elements, if it's kind of perfectly 50-50, it tends to be boring. If it's exactly balanced between the two, let's move that one way or the other a little bit. So like instead of a 50-50, do that. Um if there's this visual is kind of my answer to that question is whichever way you're tipping it, more busy or less, don't make it exactly even. Make it a little bit more of one or the other. And actually, just so that I am practicing what I'm preaching, I think there's too much visual activity on this. So let's dial that back a little. As much as I like that shoulder pattern, I think that her scarf is pretty visually interesting, and these stripes might be enough for this jacket to tell the story I want, to kind of complete that equation. Now I think it's more like this. So it's oddly like sort of a calculation. Anytime we can turn art from just chaos into something sort of manageable and, formulaic, it tends to just make it a lot easier to go from a blank canvas, like what on earth am I going to do with this, into, you know, a workflow you can reliably conjure cool stuff out of. Awesome question. Any other questions, Lynn? I think
Oh man,
figure
there's so
one.
many. I've been kind of like going through and trying to like bring them into what you're working on. Uh,
Yeah,
there's tons. One was how can hair help with the design? For example, like long hair, you kind of got that hair down pretty quick.
I totally got lucky there because this is something that I usually just noodle to death. Hair is so weirdly outsized importance as far as how the whole design and personality reads. I think hair does a lot of designy things for us. First of all, if we are in need of some visual activity, we can always make like extra animated hair. Hair can often be this really great way to make lines that like lead back to the face, which is always a priority, right? Humans want to engage with humans. This is probably where everybody's attention will go immediately. So the more lines in this figure pointing back to her face, and I sort of that kind of happened with the pose with her elbows flared out. It kind of points things back up. I'd pose is sort of this flowy gesture leading back to her face. So it serves that need of just essentially making lines that lead back to the character's face. It's also just such a human element, right? Like, I think these little ponytails are cool. That's sort of the beginning and the end of it. Like I feel like I understand this woman's personality a little bit better because of a choice I made. I'm trying to make her all like edgy and interesting and cool. Um, I again like practiced this and looked at some like interesting hairstyles before the stream today, but I've also just got a lot of these filed away in my visual library. So when I want a person to communicate something, some good options for a hairstyle that'll work. And I'll try to do something that sort of fits this character too. So right, visual lines leading back to where we want attention to go. It's kind of instant movement and dynamism. Honestly, you know, anytime you add wind or something like her scarf or her hair, it's going to add a little bit of drama. I think it's easy to go overboard with that and make it sort of cheesy. Like it's literally why there's like the fan blowing on the model in the perfume commercial. It's somehow, I don't know why, but that just looks dramatic. Cool question. But it sounded like we had a few others, so hopefully that's an okay answer.
Yeah, I mean that you seem like you got the hair off just like that. Someone was wondering like how many iterations would you do before presenting this?
Good question. I actually think it's possible to version something to death. Like even if you think you're providing more value to your client by doing 12 of these, sometimes that's like it's too much, right? Too many options, especially when they're all good. Actually that happens with in the so many we have awesome class right now, and so many of their initial explorations are like you did too many and they're all awesome, and now I'll be heartbroken if you don't finish all of three is the short. I usually think that's a good way to just your best ideas into three good. That's at least a good way. I've done that and they've said like lots, or we start in. Sometimes I just somehow have learned to kind of anticipate client needs and I can just nail it in the first try. Case by case basis, but I think three is always a very fair starting point. Just then we can mix and match. I like the hair from number one, but I really like the boots from number three. So let's kind of mix and match things together. Great question. Um, Pause. This is sort of like stream halftime, but I hope that makes sense. Just sort of a recap. Like basically what we did was form-fitting, visually sparse, visually quiet shape on one half of the body, and totally the opposite on the top, like big and chunky, sparse and form-fitting. A little bit of echoing, like kind of splash what's going on down to the bottom, kind of echoing thing. And that's it. Design balance, kind of emptiness set off by areas of lots of little small choppy shapes. It's a bizarrely powerful and like replicatable formula that just leads to cool stuff every time. And it's one of the things we drill most regularly in the mentorship. In fact, I'll sort of grab that as my segue. Let's check out Concept Art Academy very briefly, and then I want to jump in and do this, but in the exact opposite way, and it will look equally cool. So, here we go, guys. If you have been considering this. First of all, just who I made this for is basically myself way earlier in my process, which is where I felt like my work was good. I wanted to be a professional artist more than anything, or I just wanted those art god of art station skills. I was practicing a lot, plateaued. I was detailing everything to death. And I was just kind of feeling rudderless and lost and wish that I just had somebody say, here's what you need to learn in what order. And this is how we get you from where you are to where you want to be. If I had to put it in a nutshell, that's exactly what we have tried to build here. And I'm really proud of it. I think it genuinely can help artists, take huge steps towards their art goals, whatever they are. It's a 12-week session. So our next one starts on February 20th. It is 6 weeks of design, lots of stuff like this. But we're kind of just scratching the surface today. But there are more shape principles like that we from day one start talking about, start drilling with exercises, and then start putting into practice with some course projects that are designed to feel like real world hired assignments. So everything is very industry focused, and it's designed to create exactly what I was not creating long ago, which is valuable portfolio pieces, industry focused work that when an art director or a recruiter sees the work that you're creating, they see an artist who is a solution to their problems, who can advance a project, who can kind of be that valuable input into a business equation. So, as much as we concept art is not just pictures. It kind of is, and I'll get to that next, but it's the value piece, it's problem solving, it's actually providing that service of developing an idea in a visually pleasing way with shape design, that will work. That is the real job. So for the second half is when we do make pretty pictures, because I think that's important too. I think a concept artist to have a competitive portfolio, we need some really polished, eye-catching stuff in there that will stand out. And we need to render with realism, but also artfulness, kind of learning when to throttle detail, not just maxing everything out all the time. Um, Learning to use things, even the shapes we've designed with and paint with, to draw focus, draw attention, kind of lead our viewer where we want them to go. Always a favorite and one of the main pieces of value that enrollment brings is the exercise library. I have basically made a step-by-step sheet on how to paint just you are likely to encounter, right? Clouds and skies, foliage, special effects, even like tech, translucents, containers. Anything you're likely to encounter is a painting challenge. It's in there. Brushstroke by brushstroke, just follow along and you'll have a technique that will work. But beyond that, and I'll wrap this part up very quickly, is we go into portfolio building, we go into kind of creating a professional career plan if you are doing this as an aspiring professional. If you're not, perfectly great too. It's still kind of the same elite skills that we are teaching here. But there's career support. I'm still in touch with artists who were in my very first class years ago. So I take this really seriously. Any artist who entrusts me with this, I want you to achieve your goals, whatever they are. Um, Bitch, if you have just, you can contact us by going to digitalpaintingstudio.com in the mentorship section, and just click contact, those forms end up finding their way to me, and I'll get back to you with a very, personalized answer for your situation. Cool. Grab a seat. Let's work together.
There
All
was
right.
a question around the academy and just if there's like a minimum skill level you need, or do you have to show any pieces of work, that kind of thing.
That's an awesome question. There's no like application like where you have to be approved or anything. If you are not, if you're worried you will be out of your depth, reach out to me and I can check your workout and let you know. There's always a wide range of skills in every class, though. It's a small group setting very deliberately. We often have artists who are already professional or like just on that threshold, and artists who are much like earlier in their journey. Everybody can take significant steps forward. And it's kind of cool. I like having that range of experience in each class because I think everybody learns from each other. It's a really cool environment. So there is no set like you must be this tall to ride, but if you are worried you will be out of your depth, definitely reach out to me. Um, the only like minimum that I would set is you should be quite comfortable and familiar with digital painting apps if you draw and paint in any app. By the way, you don't have to use Photoshop to do this. You can use Procreate, Clip Studio Paint, whatever. It doesn't really matter. If you are feeling generally comfortable with a digital painting app, you'll do great. In fact, I sort of love getting in on at an early phase with an artist and actually teaching them shape design before they get so in love with rendering realistically, because that's what happened to me. I learned to render and had to go back and like take everything apart and learn how to design in order to make something that was ever really good and competitive and valuable in an industry point of view. Cool question. Yeah, but guys, please reach out. Just do that contact form on the mentorship page, and hopefully we can. I'm sure there's a link in the chat, but that is the best way to get in touch with me if you have any questions at all. I want to make sure anybody enrolling knows exactly what they're getting and what I hope to do for you. Let's get back into this. Let's do character number two. So I am essentially going to do this, which is up is down, down is up. Like let's just try and make this character into kind of the opposite of this one. So once again, rectangular brush. So let's start with pants. And you probably can guess sort of where I'm going with this, which is like really big, really visually dense, kind of chunky bottom half. Just like how we did the top half over here. Um, so I mean, flowy robes. There are many ways you could go with this. Those giant Aikido pants, those are an option. In fact, let's try that. Let's do kind of a robe, but with pants also, right? And honestly, this I love when a genre is just a tiny bit ambiguous. Like, actually, she looks like she's in some cool kung fu movie already,
Yeah,
but
totally.
right? But with like the smallest pivot, she's a Jedi. Like literally, all I have to do is this and suddenly I've got a lawsuit. Um, but that's kind of the idea is just using shapes to communicate this? Oh, by the way, like when that great question about hair and what is the design use of it, it kind of led me into that topic of movement. And that's sort of why things blowing in the wind tend to look nice too, is it's all sort of this big water slide leading back to right where we want our focus to be. So cool. All right, actually, that might kind of do it. Maybe a belt. I don't know. It's easy to overdo wind and have what looks like movement or a gentle breeze turn into a hurricane. Like, that's a lot of wind. So I usually have to calm myself down on that a little bit and that actually quite smooth. I think I'll stick with like dark for the bottom half and light for the top. I guess theoretically I should be reversing that, but let's just roll with it. Okay, so let's go form fitting. Um, we could do this is sort of a ripoff of that sci-fi witch from the thumbnail, which essentially was this exact strategy. Big, flowy lower half or really lower two-thirds, and then kind of form fitting. But let's do something a little different. Just
We
kind
had
of
a question come through about the academy.
awesome.
Someone said, so if one is enrolled in the program, the live sessions are obviously the 12-week part, and you have access for 12 months to the video files. Can people still get feedback on projects after, for like the full 12 months?
Definitely. It is not at all like the doors slam shut on the day of our last class. And um kind of just informally, like I've got a pretty good working relationship with everyone in the program. So if you are on board, I really want to help you. So yes, available as a resource the full year. Honestly, um, I, I still am in touch with artists who did this some time ago. So if you need my help, it is available. Great question.
I was
Let,
wondering, how do you communicate themes in a character? So like strong and brooding versus bubbly and lighthearted.
so much of that I think happens just with the pose. I mean, I think, before we even got started with shape design, I had a really keen sense of vibe. So expression, pose, how like weight is being carried, how much does the character look like they are confident? Like, are they looking right at us? Do they feel like they're kind of above us? I think a raised chin, like literally looking down your nose at us, communicates something. Uh, there's so much human element nuance to character design, which I think is what makes it such a fascinating challenge is is how nuanced it is. Um, yeah, pose, facial expression certainly tell us a huge amount. And then it's sort of our job to make the shape design support that. Um, Great question. I hope that answers that. That's a cool one, but a tricky one.
Yeah, it sounds like it kind of depends.
Completely. Let's see. All right, I might actually have to cheat a little bit and do some lines on this one. I will later realize a solution that would have made me not have to do that, but oh well. I kind of just want to do a little bit of like shape division. I want the top half to be where her visual activity lives. So actually, maybe some less is more.
Maybe that actually kind of goes into this question. Someone says, I find that when I'm designing characters, it can be simple enough to make shapes look good at first, but then when the character is turned on a different angle, it loses its iconic look. Any advice?
That is such a great point. Right. Like sometimes a silhouette looks awesome from one angle and not from another. That's a tricky one. I think, hmm, in a lot of ways, if you're just simplifying it to this degree, like of big and heavy on one half and like sparse and form fitting on the other, that should theoretically work like at any angle. I'm sort of mentally turntabling these characters, and I think I can see it working. I don't know. I'm not answering this well.
It's a tricky question, actually.
Yeah,
I was curious what you might say.
yeah. I don't know really. I guess I can see. All right, you know what? When we have something that is designed to really read from one angle, and I think big head crests or something are a great example of this, or there's cool little flags on samurai armor or something that looks awesome when they are facing you straight away, but with the sun shining behind them. But if that turns to the side, it sort of loses its power. So I think sort of knowing how something will be used is a great way to kind of keep yourself from getting into too much trouble with that. Theoretically, I don't know if I would love for the artist to elaborate a little if possible. But I think like if it's something that is only going to be seen from a single view, then you're kind of free to not worry about that and just go nuts on whatever. You know, make that head crest behind her head look as big and impressive, and don't worry about what it would look like if she were to turn her head. Um, you know, that can be a solution. But if it is something that we're going to see in 3D, or what I've done a million times is I've designed a hero character for like a platformer game, and I've put all this attention into what the character looks like from the front, when only to find out that it's like a third person type of camera. So you're going to be seeing basically over the character's shoulder the whole time. So it's sort of like knowing your use, knowing when you're going to need which thing to be a priority, that sort of governs those decisions. I hope that is, but
Yeah.
that's a
There was actually another question after about like, would you be creating
okay.
trims of these characters? And it kind of sounds like it would just depend on what the brief is, if you need to do that or not.
Exactly right. Just sort of whatever the use is. Sometimes just a single nice looking view is all that we're really after, because it's kind of like promotional art, for example. Um, I know that's sort of the prevailing wisdom is like concept art is not pretty pictures. Sometimes pretty pictures are actually valuable to getting people excited about a game, or getting investors or Kickstarters fired up to get involved with something, that can be useful. So it's all about, that's one of the first questions I ask in an initial call with a client is just what's our intended use? Like if I just nail this project for you, what does that look like in your mind? Like what is ultimate success here? And usually that's a great way to make sure everybody's on the same page with what we're doing, what we need, all of that stuff. All right, I've been drawing like lines on a shirt for 20 minutes now. Let's keep it going. And actually, I don't know if she necessarily needs much more, but just keep this as like a visual balance and a whole like top side, bottom side contrast, this whole flip-flop thing we're doing. Let's keep making stuff. Cool. More lines pointing. Look at my head. A little visual activity too. I think this one is quite like visually sparse, but I sort of like that. That is kind of what makes it like, I don't know. Minimalism is powerful because it's like a blank canvas where everybody can project, which that is another just dark magic of art is if you can kind of lead your viewer up to a conclusion, but don't just spell it out for them. It lets them kind of send their own imagination in there and complete the whole story, and it's just way more powerful than if you just spelled it all out for them. Um,
I
oh
get the
yeah,
sense she could scale buildings.
say again.
I get the sense that she would like scale buildings or something, like just be super quick and nimble.
She's feeling like a rejected design for like the ancient one in Doctor Strange or something. It's definitely because she's bald, but it's becoming a thing in my mind. That's always like my favorite part of this is just shapes are it makes this, I don't know, complete and interesting and human. So I'm trying to think of a way to sort of do this whole what's going on the top half happening on the bottom half. In a way, I think the bare feet sort of are that thing. It's like we're going for minimalism up here. I mean, it doesn't get more minimal than nothing. So that's a way to go. We could do like those little, um, oh, sorry. We could do those little kind of ankle, I don't know what to call these things. I guess just ankle wraps. That's kind of cool. Looks very like martial artist if we want, but I kind of like just the nothing there vibe for that. Makes her look cool. So maybe we'll just give this character some hair, and that is more or less as complete as I would try to shoot for this sort of thing.
You've been kind of swapping around using different brushes, and I was wondering if we should let people know that there is some brush packs for them to grab, and they can kind of try some of these techniques out. And
That's awesome. So our brush pack is definitely available. This is what the folder looks like, and this one that is a 60, that's the one I've been using kind of entirely today. I think the only other brush I used is just a circular eraser to kind of subtract away where, I wanted to mold a shape a little bit. But absolutely, I'm sure there's a link in the chat, but if you want to grab those, they are available. Thanks for the reminder. All right, let's give her some hair, although I am considering not having hair. She looks kind of cool. In fact, sometimes if we just want to add like personality and interest, just, a face tattoo, war paint, some kind of interesting thing happening on her face is a cool strategy. But maybe like very closely cropped or something. I don't know. The very short hair makes her seem mystical somehow, and I kind of don't want to kill that. On the other hand, it costs us nothing to just do a little exploration. So, we can always try something really easily. Not bad. I could probably, you know, keep going along those lines and it might be cool. Maybe like Jedi dreadlocks or something would be kind of interesting. But shapes are the answer. And that kind of keeps going, even into very detailed, lots of hours involved digital paintings. I try to find a shape solution to any problem, and I just tend to like it better. If I can resolve something with shapes, it tends to work. It tends to just be something that I instantly get and and can read at a small scale, which again, if you haven't glanced at the thumbnail size in a while, hopefully you just get such a strong idea of silhouettes and personalities and genre and movement, even at a small scale. Uh, most of the decisions about your artwork get made at a size about that big, which is sort of horrifying, but it's also just another reason to, keep your eye here. And if you are making something and you can't tell what is going on looking at it small, probably means you're putting your energy somewhere where it's just not that important. You're kind of lost in the pixels when we need to be focusing on big picture shapes or whatever. Um, I don't know. I'm kind of just tinkering at this point, but I think the points I was hoping to show today are pretty much good to go. We have landed this. Um, any other questions in the chat before we call it a day?
Yeah, there's a few more here. Let's see. Any tip or sorry, can you give any tips on developing your own unique drawing style?
Ooh, that's a great one. Hmm. I think style seems to be a mix of like every flavor you have picked up along the way, every artist who has inspired you, and you have like learned some trick from them and added it to yourself. I think it's like half that and half just what do you have in there? Like, who are you as an artist, and what do you have to offer? As far as like how to develop that, it's sort of like a side effect in my mind. It kind of just happens with you pursuing what you think is cool. What is the work you would choose to do if you had a gazillion dollars and didn't have to worry about career anything? What would you choose for yourself? Um, that is what has sort of always been the North Star for me, or when I think of like what is my style, I'd say it's sort of that mix of my art heroes studied and tried to be like you know, a little bit of that, but also there's no way to get yourself out of the equation. It's always going to be you. Um, that's such a like squishy answer, but that's about that's honest for for me and my experience. Um, Interesting question. I feel like I recently saw or heard about a video about exactly that. And actually, I will ask the chat if anybody has something better on that. I'm not at all satisfied with my like strategy advice there. But that's a tough one.
We got a couple questions around colors now. So
Okay.
one is, do you present your character designs in black and white like this, and then add color once they've decided on a specific design? And the other one says, how would you add color to grades to grayscale? Is it better to leave in grayscale or color for a portfolio?
Awesome questions. I would usually do this first. Just let's kind of solve one problem at a time. Like, do we like the shapes? Do we like the pose? Do we like, you know, the whole shape language? I feel like you can hear the vibe and the problem solving like this. And then what is relatively easy to explore colorizing. Let's see if I make a selection of the entire character and fill it in with, you know, a color. I feel like I am started along those lines. And if it's just exploration, like if I am really just trying to a color scheme, sometimes keep it as unrendered and as weird as this, just because I kind of like that, and I think it really loudly, you know, shows what we are trying to do. What's great about this is every article of clothing is still there, so I can make selections from all of these and just paint on top of them, add overlay layers. You know, I think it's okay to get messy and kind of start your layer count can start getting out of control, but your client doesn't have to see that. It's just a way to kind of add color. So for like color tests, which is what I consider this phase, that's all I would do is take the black and white design, use those layers that I already have, and color stuff. Everything here is pretty much flat. Like there's no rendering. Even this made out of shapes is you know, still just a shape, basically. We can colorize that without having to like repaint anything. So kind of just photoshoppery to assign colors to stuff, all knowing that it's all infinitely reworkable. And actually, I really like that. I kind of like the dark cyan on light cyan. She feels sort of sci-fi. So I would try and, you know, make her skin tones a little more real. And then, although if this is sci-fi, maybe she is blue. Actually, that's sort of cool. So exactly what I'm doing here, that's how I would go about that. Cool. Anything else? Any other questions, guys? Or we can go ahead and say goodbye and thank you if there's nothing else.
Yeah, I think there's a ton more just about painting and like how you started your career and what makes a good portfolio. So I'm just kind of looking around. Um, Just a quick question about clothing and proportions. When making clothes or outfits for characters, do you kind of just eyeball the proportions, or how do you go about dressing them?
So I think more in terms of like shapes. For example, like super easy on this one, when we have a figure that we're confident in that like I drew this as well as I could, so I know the proportions and the shape of the legs look the way I want. Kind of like the pants are just the body essentially. As for the jacket, it is possible to kind of get a little bit lost, especially chunkier. For example, this one's probably a little bit weirdly short. It would probably go a bit lower. It's kind of like a short jacket. Plenty of that as a shape design. Just don't want it to get absurd. I think that's why it's to have like a essentially a mannequin that you know is solid before we start that. Otherwise, right, things can get very wonky. The shirt totally doesn't match the scale of the pants because the torso was too big or something like that. So relying on your figure drawing at the core, I think is really key for that.
There's a couple people here that are sort of new, and they're wondering how do they start on concept art as a complete beginner? So with fundamentals, not knowing where to get started.
That's awesome. I think shapes are where concept art begins and ends. Um, One of my favorite exercises in our design module is just to draw a collection of rocks. Um, the most boring, most like mundane subject imaginable. But when you're using shape design principles, it can turn even a boring thing into something beautiful that has personality, that sort of has like dynamism. So I think shape design actually, hopefully today gave you some ideas on like how to kind of not just draw a shape, but how to actually just carve it out really quickly and fine tune it and mold it. If you are really, really a beginner with concept art, I think designing things just with shapes is huge. I wish if I were starting over, this is what I would be doing. Um, Now, from there, just making shapes start, but thinking about story, like how to go a bit deeper on the design. If you are designing, I don't know, a robot, for example, things like what's that robot and how does his look like that? He should have hand like a fork, a crane, or something. Uh, that the shapes lot is made of tells us a lot about the world. Like, if he looks at bulldozer parts, then he'll look like humans made him, right? He's this industrial worker bot type thing. So, kind of developing that mindset where whenever we're something and it's like, this is cool, let's go deeper and say, why is this cool? How can we make it tell a visual story, build the world just by implication? Like, hopefully, you're sort of imagining a world that this woman comes from. And I would watch 6 seasons of whatever this is, right? That's sort of what we're trying to do. That's that like step beyond that deeper layer that we're trying to crack with concept art. I think that's that threshold that makes it like this artist can help me when an art director is sifting through. Uh, but good luck.
I think with the snow, you're cutting in a little bit in and out for me.
Oh,
I'm having a hard time hearing you. So I did get some of that, but some of it, I don't know if other people are getting the same thing.
I've
Um,
been getting internet warnings. I was worried about. Oh well.
Maybe
Uh,
just one last question to wrap it up. This one, I
sure.
think, is just sort of like a general. You said at the beginning that, you created this for yourself so that it's one of those things where if you were new to it, this is a place to start. So if there's people that are new to it and they're kind of looking for a couple lessons to get their feet wet or, what would be your recommendation to sort of interact with Digital Painting Studio if they're new and sort of what makes the most sense to get started for their resources and things like that?
That's awesome. I mean, always start free, right? So we have a Discord community that's fantastic, and hopefully we can drop a link to that. That is, first of all, it's just nice to know that there are so many people who are kind of on the same path as you. I wish that had been around when I was younger. So that's a great place to start. We have like a monthly concept art challenge that is like a contest. I think that's an awesome way to get engaged, start practicing reliably. It's a great place to like meet accountability buddies, people who will make you stick to your art. Like, I think I will let myself down without a second thought. Like, I'll do it tomorrow. But if a friend is expecting me to do something for them, like, you'll never let a friend down, right? So that accountability piece is really great. We've also got some pretty like, you know, low bar things if you want to spend a little money on gaining some new skills. It's a very phased in thing at Digital Painting Studio. We have an intro to digital painting course that's $9 per month. Some great like basic skills can be built there. And kind of just whatever your appetite is for more depth and like more intensive study, we've got a level. There's our skill builder subscription. And then what I've been talking about, the mentorship, if you actually want to work directly with me, I think that's the fastest and most meaningful way to like really gain the skills that an aspiring professional would want. That's the way it is. So there's a whole spectrum depending on your needs and what you're into. But start with free. Check out Discord. Lots of cool stuff there. Hopefully you're enjoying the other stuff I have on YouTube because that's the other like free offer coming out of DPS. And I'm always trying to keep new content coming there. So that's what I would recommend.
Right on. Well, I think that's kind of all the questions we had for today.
So cool. Thanks, guys. I hope this was helpful. Chunky on one side, sparse on the other, and then flip, and it still works. Just to have a conclusion statement there. Thanks for hanging out. Great to see you guys. And yeah, reach out if you have any questions about the mentorship or anything. Have a good one and see you next time. Thanks for your help, Celine.
Yeah, no problem.